The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and in that studio, Joseph Hernandez, running for New York State Comptroller. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here with you.
I'm glad you found the time. It sounds like you're a very busy man.
Oh, it's all good.
It's part of the job, right?
It is. It's hard work, but it's all good.
Well, you're a busy man. Why did you decide to run for New York State Comptroller?
Well, this is it starts really in my personal life story, which is I came to this country at the age of 7 as an immigrant, and I came here legally. I like to always remind people.
Yes.
And my father was a political prisoner, and we came here with nothing.
Wow.
My father washed dishes. My mom, she cleaned houses when we were at school, just to put food on our table. And we were taught some very important lessons. The first one is to work hard, because nothing is free. To get educated, which is one of the things we did, and to love America. That was really instilled in us from the very beginning. And the last thing they reminded us is at some point in our lives, we had to give back to this great society that gave us so much. So I'm running to repay my debt to America. I mean, that's really the reason I'm doing it.
Did you ever think your path would lead to Comptroller potentially?
No.
Does anybody dream when they're a kid?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Be Comptroller?
I don't think that's one of the things people dream about. But they certainly dream about giving, about service and giving back, which is what I'm doing. And I'm too old to serve in the military, so this is my military duty, if you would.
That's funny.
Sometimes you have to take whatever jobs are offered.
Of course. For those, and I think we should start at kind of the basics here. For those that don't know exactly the job of the Comptroller, what would your responsibilities be?
Well, the Comptroller is an incredibly powerful role, an incredibly relevant role. It doesn't get the glamour and glitz of the other, ticket or the upstate, top of the ticket roles like governor and attorney general. But it's certainly a very important role because you're effectively the money manager. You're the CFO of the state, and it's an elected office, a separately elected office, because the framers of the Constitution in 1847 decided it was important to have that person only report to the taxpayers. Before it used to report to the governor. There was a lot of shady stuff happening. So the people that framed the Constitution of New York decided that it needed to be a separate role, and it really has two primary functions. The first one is the comptroller. The comptroller needs to effectively pay all the bills for the state. So they need to validate all the vouchers, and within that comes the power of the audit. So the ability to ensure that the payments are done correctly, making sure there's no fraud and abuse in the system, and making sure there's no double payments. Kind of the basic accounting and payment format that are required. And the second very important function is you're effectively the manager, the sole trustee of $300 billion of pensioners' money. This is money that belongs to the people that gave their lives to the state, and you're responsible for investing that money and ensuring that you get good returns. And making sure you follow the fiduciary duty that's required of that role.
Sure. And explain that. What would if you're elected comptroller, where would you look to invest? Because that seems like that's a major part and an important part of the job.
Yeah, no, it's an important part of the role. I mean, look, historically, we've done pretty poor. Last year, we got 5.8% return on the fund. We paid out $16 billion in benefits to people that were retirees and pensioners. And the reason it's important to get a good return is for every dollar that you don't make up, you have to pass the hat around and ask taxpayers to make up the difference. And obviously that's a very, very big challenge if you're somebody running a small city and you got to make a decision between a fire truck and paying the pension fund, which you have to. So the returns are really important. Portfolio theory applies here. This is really what I do for a living, investing, and I do mostly venture and public offerings. But you got to apply portfolio theory. So you got to spread the money out, spread the risk out. But at the same time, you really need to be very smart about where you deploy capital from a growth perspective. And following portfolio theory is really important. If you compare our pension fund to other funds like CalPERS, which is the California Pension Fund, it's about a $500 billion fund. A Teachers Union Fund in Canada, the Ontario Teachers Union Fund, the Canadian Pension Fund, they all do something different than our fund, and that is that they have an in-house investment team. Rather than allocate capital to Wall Street like we do here in New York, you hire investors that know what they're doing and allocate capital correctly, and you apply the portfolio theory. And what really happens when you do that is you get better returns. So those guys have about 12% return on average. Just to put it into perspective, the S&P yielded 16% last year. Okay. We were at 5.8, so we had dismal performance, in my opinion. Yeah. So I plan to really bring in an in-house investment team reduce the fees to Wall Street. We paid Wall Street $1.4 billion in fees last year.
Wow.
I can build a team for pennies on the dollar and get better performance. So that's what we're going to do for the fund.
Why do you think our return was so dismal? Is this something where it gets almost, because I know in other states, maybe in this state, where they start to make decisions based on politics?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's really one of the drivers. If you look at the way the fund has been managed in New York by Tom DiNapoli, one thing they do is they invest. They have these criteria of investing that really are not in high growth areas. You look at green energy, and not to say that you should invest in green energies, but there are things that are better than others. So having a broad mandate like that is difficult. Putting filters like political filters in terms of what countries you can invest in and so forth, those are issues. One of the other things that Tom has done with the fund, which I am vehemently against, is he's used DEI policies to allocate capital. If you look at the capital that's been allocated for what I call money managers or third-party managers, about 30% of that has been allocated based on DEI requirements. They don't break down how those have returned, and not to say that there's not good managers in there.
Sure.
But the reality is when you use that kind of filter, you kind of dilute the primary role, which is to get the best possible returns for pensioners.
I mean, if you're investing your own money, we're not talking taxpayers. You wouldn't want to go to your broker and say, "Hey, I want DEI." You'd say, "Give me the most money," right?
The most money. You got to do ethical things, and you got to have a moral compass, of course, in what you do in your decision making. But you can't use politics as a filter. And unfortunately, a lot of these state funds, New York being kind of the leader in that, has started to use political filters to make investments, and you see the byproduct, which is poor returns.
And do you think that maybe speaks to why Thomas DiNapoli's numbers in the recent Standard poll were so poor?
Well, I mean, I find those numbers fascinating. Just an individual that's been in office for 20 years, in public office for longer than that. I mean, I always joke he's been around longer than the internet's been around.
It's true.
Which is factual, and nobody knows who he is, which is really fascinating. That says a couple of things. One is, by the way, this role is supposed to be a loud role. You're supposed to say no. In budget negotiations, you're supposed to be pounding on the table. When there's fraud and abuse, you should be the one leading, kicking in the door type of thing. This role has not been that for 20 years, and it needs to be more aggressive. It needs to be a watchdog. That's the intent. Tom DiNapoli has been a lapdog for the state, and we're going to change that.
It seems to be, at least to me, from an outsider's perspective, his big thing is you check your name and address, and you might have a check coming from you.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the shtick, right? I think that's where most people hear his name is just from that one-trick pony a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And and audits that are not really financial audits, they're audits about things that that don't impact your life really.
Right.
So I'm going to change the mindset there. We're going to do real audits. We're going to do forensic audits. We're going to build what I'm calling the fraud strike team, and that's going to be primarily focused on smoking out fraud and abuse in our system. We know that it's there.
Yes.
And if you look at Medicaid alone, we have $110 billion allocated.
And why do we not look at that?
We just don't. We don't spend time on it. The fraud and abuse that's been identified has been primarily by third parties highlighting it, or political individuals saying, or political figures saying, elected officials saying there's something here.
Yeah, right.
It hasn't been a proactive endeavor. We're going to run a completely different proactive endeavor. We're going to hire forensic accountants. We're going to hire people who know how to build these financial prosecution files to hand to prosecutors, and we're going to use big data tools, data analytics, AI to find fraud and abuse. The reality is you don't have to even use these tools. I analyze it. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a scientist by training, so maybe I have a slightly unfair advantage. But we looked at some of the Medicaid numbers that were released back in January, and just by using basic analysis, I mean, even if you put the data in Claude, it'll throw out anomalous stuff. Like, for example, there is a cluster of home health care payment in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Billions of dollars are being deployed out of Brooklyn. Why is that?
Yeah.
Nobody's looked into that. Why is there 5 agencies that allocate almost 60% of all the payments that are done from the state? I mean, that is a clear beacon, red flag that there's fraud and abuse. And by the way,
that's at the base level.
That was me spending maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes on it. It is ubiquitous, and it hasn't been looked at. We haven't done an aggressive up and down view on this. I don't think it's a priority for the current comptroller. It'll certainly be my priority. I think there's billions of dollars in fraud and abuse that could be brought back to the taxpayers and used the way it's supposed to and intended to be used. And that's going to be a primary focus for us.
Isn't it interesting? I think it tells a lot when someone fights an audit on numbers that big.
Absolutely.
So don't you think
Yeah.
It would be probably, to the viewers out there, it'd probably be terrifying if we actually knew how bad those numbers were. When you get in there and you say, here's what we're looking at, I think it'd be unbelievable.
I can, I always compare our Medicaid is a very big, in my opinion, a big concentration of fraud and abuse. Minnesota, everybody's talking about Minnesota and all this noise. Minnesota's budget on Medicaid is only $19 billion. Ours is $110 billion. So just add a factor of fraud and abuse in our system. And by the way, we have less oversight than probably Minnesota does. Yeah. And I think it's astronomical. And I think when we get to the bottom of it, when we finally smoke this thing out, we're going to be astonished at the amount of abuse and the length of abuse that's occurred here.
And I know, obviously, you've already touched on it a little bit, but I do have this as my note. Overall, we talked about the pensions, but overall, the job that Thomas DiNapoli, if anybody knows who he is, according to the polls, the job that he has done overall.
Well, I mean, I think when you sort of compare performance on the pension fund, I think that's been poor. Yeah. I think when you look at the fraud and abuse, I think that's poor. Another area worth highlighting is, we have this thing called the unclaimed funds. Yeah. That when Tom DiNapoli started, there was about $6 to $7 billion in unclaimed funds, and these are monies that are usually returned to the state when bank accounts are left abandoned, or someone dies, doesn't claim property, or even your gift cards. When you buy them, they go back to the state. Yeah. And the state's role is supposed to find the rightful owner. Well, when he started, this fund was about $6 billion worth of unclaimed funds. Today it's almost $21 billion. And of course, there's no incentive in returning this money because it's slush money for the state.
Right, of course.
Interest free. So think about it. You have $20 billion you can borrow interest free. So he hasn't done a good job of returning that capital. On day one, we're going to use, again, data mining tools to find the rightful owner and return that money. But I think, if you were to analyze the role, I think there's been complacency, institutional kind of fatigue. We really need somebody aggressive to root out the fraud and abuse, especially with the size of this budget. It's an astronomical budget,
of course,
and we need real scrutiny.
When you talk about the complacency, do you think that's why he now has Democrat primary challengers?
I think that's part of it. I think that there's another extreme part of the party. I mean, I think when you look at Tom, he's not crazy left.
Right.
I mean, he's left, but he's not crazy left.
Right.
I think there's an evolution of the party that's crazy left, and I think you're seeing these crazy left people challenge him.
Run for anything.
And
really,
and exactly. And I think, look, what we're trying to bring is to the table something different. It's common sense. It's real oversight. It's the intended role, which is to be a watchdog for the taxpayer, and that's what I intend to be.
But what does it say about the Democrat primary? Because you don't have a primary.
I don't have a primary. I'm happy to say I was unanimously selected
congratulations.
by both the Republican and Conservative Party. I don't know if that means there was nobody else that wanted the job, but I was, and I'm thankful for that. I'm proud of that.
But in the Democrat Party, the Working Families Party of all people will not make an endorsement.
Yeah, that just happened today.
Yeah, that's shocking.
Well, it is. It is. I think. Look, I think that I have my opinions about that party.
Of course,
I mean, it's a semi-socialist, I would argue, communist sort of ideology in terms of what they believe in. I like to pick funds. I like to pick fun at that group because I come from socialism. I know what it's like.
Yeah, so
I come from a communist country, and I just find it fascinating and almost unrealistic that somebody would want that ideology in our society, which is the antithesis of that.
Well, they didn't live it. That's the difference. It's this utopian dream that we're seeing.
It's not real, and it's not worked. I mean, I always like to bring history into this argument. If you look at socialism and communism, what has it done for the world? It's killed 100 million people. When you look at Mao's China, you look at Vietnam, you look what happened in the Soviet Union, even in Cuba, Venezuela. There's no positive example of this ideology. When you compare that to what we have here in America, what's made America the nation that we are, capitalism has lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. It's not perfect, and certainly we can do things better. But when you compare those two ideologies, there's no comparison.
Do you think we've had this discussion on the program before, do you think it's almost an ego issue where, like look at Mayor Mamdani, that it's never worked before, but I'm the one that can actually do it?
I think that's partly it, but I also think there's just unrealistic. It's utopia. You believe what you read, but you haven't experienced it. You don't have the advantage of experience, I would argue.
Sure.
And I think it's been tried many times before, and it's never really worked. And it's sad that it's getting some traction here in New York, and we got to put an end to it. We have to.
Well, this kind of ties in with my next question. how do we stop the mass exodus? Because when you see people that are Democrat Socialists of America pushing these kind of ideas, it's causing businesses to leave in droves. It's causing people to leave in droves. I mean, I know the Comptroller's office has a lot on their plate, but how would you help or hope to stop that exodus?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at what the current politicians are doing, and I blame everybody across the spectrum here because it's happening at the state level, it's happening at the city level, like New York. I mean, making videos in front of somebody who employs that many people in the city has built a great company. And by the way, he did this in the dorms. I mean, this guy didn't. It's not like he inherited the wealth he has. He's built it through hard work and risk. And to do things like that, to drive companies like Apollo, like Elliott Capital, now the Citadel. You're driving out the people that employ and pay the majority of the taxes in the state.
Right.
And by the way, it's not like we're spending less money, we're spending more money. So we're driving the people that pay the taxes out and we're spending more money. This is a trajectory that's not a good trajectory.
It's sustainable.
It's a fiscal crisis at the making, in my humble opinion.
And speaking of a fiscal crisis, let's talk about the budget.
Oh my gosh.
So obviously there's a lot of moving pieces right now. Hochul's saying is in, but we don't have to get through all of that.
Yeah.
But just the process itself, where do you see this, really the mess that we're in Albany?
Well, this is a clown show. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it, but first of all, we have the mayor of New York City driving a lot of the agenda and really being in control.
Yeah.
The governor doing whatever Mondami wants in the city. You have a ballooning budget. You have a situation where the bond rating agencies are downgrading potentially the bonds in the city. And by the way, that's where it starts. Once they start there, they're going to move to the state. I mean, I think you have an anomalous situation. You have one person announcing the budget's complete, the other one saying no, it's not.
Right.
You have people protesting Kathy who are supposedly ideologically aligned. I mean, it's a total mess.
It's a mess.
And it's not like we're reducing the budget. The numbers are now 268, $8 billion more.
Yeah.
$8 billion more than projected. And you're driving the tax base out. Your bond rating is decreasing. I mean, this is if you were to make a catastrophe on the financial crisis of a state, this is how you make the movie.
$250 billion.
It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
It's really unbelievable. What does it say about the state when you have three people in the same room, in the same party, and they still can't come together and make this decision? And by the way, the whole argument about policy in the budget, we could get to that, but doesn't that say a lot about what the mess we're dealing with?
There are no leaders here.
No.
You need an adult in the room. This is complete people trying to drive their own personal agenda with not having the interests of the taxpayer in mind.
Exactly.
And I think that is I mean, I hope the voters are waking up to this because this is not sustainable.
I'm going to take a short break. Can you stay with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. We're broadcasting live from the Hasselson studio. In that studio, Joseph Hernandez, running for New York State Comptroller. Before we move on, kind of just do a recap. Tell us a little bit about this potential lawsuit, as we talked earlier about Governor Hochul.
Yeah. Well, look, I think when you look at the history of this office, again, about in 1847 or so, the people who drafted the Constitution realized that there was a disconnect between, fiscal oversight, the executive and the legislative function of the state, and they realized that we needed a third-party overseer, basically somebody that had their eyes on the money, because there's a lot of money flowing through these budgets. And so they created the office of the Comptroller as a separately elected office. And in that, if you look at the Constitution is very clear. Article 5, Section 1 says that all vouchers need to be approved by the Comptroller. All vouchers. Yeah. That means every invoice, every contract, everything that requires a payment.
Okay.
And historically, they have adjusted those numbers through legislation. Right now, it's at 50,000. I think it's unconstitutional. The Constitution is very clear. It says all. It doesn't say 50. Right. It doesn't say 100. It doesn't say $50. It says all. So I think that's been an issue. I think in this last budget proposal that Kathy Hochul's put forth, she's attempted to change that further. So she's moving that threshold to 300,000, which is significant, not from a numerical perspective, because it's really a 6x fold from where it is today. But what it does allow is about $3 billion of contracts to flow through without any oversight. Wow. So you think about things like grants to not-for-profits. Sure. When you think about consultant contracts, these things won't require any oversight if this passes. So I have been very clear with the governor and those that are enabling her to put this in the budget. And that includes Tom DiNapoli, that includes the budget director, Washington, and the other folks in the legislative branch of government. And I have made it very clear that if that passes in the budget, I will sue them the next day. I've even shared with them the lawsuit so they can read it and be prepared for what they're about to be served with. But I'm dead serious. I think this is it's an attack on the taxpayer. It is an insult to logic and common sense, and I'm not going to put up with it. I want to give Tom DiNapoli credit here because he agrees with me. However, he's not saying anything. He's not jumping on the table. He's not pounding pounding on the desk. I'm going to pound on the desk and I'm going to sue them, and we're going to reverse this.
Has DiNapoli ever really been a part of the budget process? You never hear his name thrown around at all.
Well, it's supposed to be part of the role as well. Right, you're supposed to be involved. You're supposed to be analyzing how these numbers really intersect and what the trajectory looks like from a revenue perspective. I haven't seen him. You don't hear his name as part of the budget process.
He's not a part of the three people in the room.
Yeah, no. I guarantee you that if I'm elected, I'm forcing myself into that room. There's no question about it.
Perfect. So before we go, what is your vision for the Comptroller's office? So after Election Day, you get sworn in January. What would your Comptroller's office look like?
Well, look, we're going to focus on three main areas, and they all sort of the overarching theme of it is affordability and making sure that we protect the taxpayer. The first thing we're going to do is, again, we're going to build an in-house investment team. We're going to stop paying these crazy fees to Wall Street. We're going to get our returns better than 5.8. We're going to shoot for what our peer funds that have their own in-house investment teams do, north of 10%. That should be pretty significant because every 1 percentage point is about $3 billion back to the coffer. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to really rout out this fraud and abuse. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to build this fraud strike team. We're going to house 40 people almost immediately. We're going to really move quickly on this and smoke out this fraud and abuse and put people in prison. We got to enforce the law that exists in the books, and we cannot put up with people stealing from the hardworking taxpayers of the state. So we're going to execute that plan very, very fast. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to invest in New York. So I've put together a plan that we call the Empire Opportunity Fund. We're setting aside $10 billion from the pension fund with really the primary focus of ensuring significant returns for our pensioners, but also investing in New York. And we're going to put money to work here. We're going to bring companies here. I mean, you read the story about Corning leaving or investing in North Carolina.
But they're going to North Carolina, Texas.
Yeah. I mean, why don't those jobs should be here?
$3.2 billion, right?
It's insanity. 3,000 jobs. I mean, we could use those 3,000 jobs. And, we've created a climate that's not business friendly. We got to change that. Mm-hmm. The Comptroller role has only a limited role there. But our goal is to, invest $10 billion in the next generation of companies that are in artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, robotics, energy, aviation, defense. These are all the growth sectors of the future. We're going to bring companies here as equity investors. Yeah. So this is not a grant. We're not giving money away. Right. We're going to make investments in these companies. We're going to diligence them like you would a venture capitalist. Bring them here, invest in them, create the next tax base, and then create the next generation of jobs for our kids so they don't have to leave these great communities. Right. And so we have to work hard to do that, especially in the northern parts of the states and the western parts of the states that have been neglected for 20, 30 years. And the other thing that we forget about is the pension fund. Look, we invest $5 billion in NVIDIA.
Okay. Yeah.
The same company that just did this, right?
The money Corning. Yeah.
If I'm Comptroller, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to call the CEO of NVIDIA and say, look, if we invest $5 billion in you, why aren't you investing in our people?
Exactly.
And that's a phone call I'm going to make to all CEOs of these big corporations that we have significant positions in. Google is one, Microsoft. I mean, these are all companies that we have massive investments in, and you should have a say as an investor. And I'm going to have a say, I promise you that.
And don't you think just having the message, because I think going back again to the Siena poll, or when we talk about him being involved in the budget, there is just no real clear message coming from DiNapoli's office. It's quiet, where you're coming out and saying, this is what my plan is. What's his plan?
Listen, as I said, maybe after 20 years you get tired of the role and you forget what you need to do and what the role is intended to be. You haven't been really seriously challenged, and I think this is the year for that on both on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. Yeah. I feel like, when I talk to people across the state, My message is common sense.
Yeah.
It's logical. Everybody wants the things that I'm articulating here, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and that's why, as I travel through the state, the momentum and support for me increases significantly, and we're going to continue to work hard to get the support of everybody, because I think, look, the Comptroller role is supposed to represent everybody, and that's what I intend to do.
When you mention support, how can we help? Just before we go, how can we help, or how can we find out more?
Look, I'm just trying to get the message across, to the extent you can tell your friends and colleagues. This particular race is, in my opinion, a turning point for New York. I think we need new leadership in Albany on the governor's role, on the attorney general's role, on the comptroller's role. So we need everybody to get out there and really support change in Albany, because we need it. Again, I'm trying to get my message out. The best way to do that is to visit my website, hernandezforny.com. We're trying to get the matching funds, so any
Are you having the same hiccup?
What's that?
Are you having the same hiccup as Blakeman?
No, we haven't been challenged.
Okay.
Not yet. But these Democrats,
I know.
they bring all kinds of things to the party. Look, we're trying to make the match, and anything helps. $5, $10, $15, whatever you can donate. This is I always like to be dramatic about it, because it is a dramatic situation. This is our Normandy. This is our D-Day. Yeah. If we don't win this battle, New York is in a trajectory that we're not going to recognize New York 5 years from now.
Oh.
I think fiscally, we're going to have fiscal crisis. The exodus of companies and people are going to continue. And this is going to be a very, very sad chapter for New York.
I couldn't agree more. Well, first of all, let me say best of luck.
Thank you so much. I
All
appreciate
right.
that.
Thank you so much for giving us so much time, and I hope we can do this again when you're comptroller.
Such a pleasure. I look forward to it. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.